Okay, look what I have here. These are chocolate chip meringues. And you probably have never seen anything like this before, but these have actually been in the oven for 24 hours, overnight, with the oven turned off. And if you're scratching your head wondering what's that all about, well, just keep watching. But they are not like a typical cookie. Let me take one. These come out very, very crisp. It's not really a cookie at all, it's a meringue. Let me see when oh, okay. So they just kind of almost made like a pop sound. But they're very crispy, they're very crumbly. I'm gonna take a bite of this side. They have chocolate chips in them, peanuts in them. Let's give it a try. Uh-oh. Those are so good. They really are. They're easy to make. And they really are something new, something different. So let me show you how to make them. Okay, so to make these forgotten meringues, what you're gonna need is, you're gonna need 2 egg whites, and I have a bag with some egg white in them, and it's egg whites only, not the full eggs, egg whites. And this was left over from another dessert that I made where I used the yolks. So it's 3 egg whites in here. Now that's more than we need. We only need 2. So I'm gonna show you how to measure out egg whites. We'll get back to that. You're also gonna need regular sugar, chocolate chips, peanuts is an optional ingredient, but they're really good in this. But if you're allergic to peanuts, you could leave it out. Or if you don't like peanuts, you could leave it out. You also need vanilla, regular salt, and as far as equipment goes, you are going to need a mixer to do this. Now I have a KitchenAid mixer, which is really nice, and the attachment you're going to use is the whisk attachment, this one. If you have one of these kinds of mixers, this will work too. With the regular beaters, this will work as well. You're also going to need parchment paper, okay? And before I started this, I preheated the oven to 350. It's super important that you preheat the oven because these are gonna bake like no other cookies you've ever made before, and the oven has to be at 350. It can't be on its way to 350, still preheating. It has to be at 350, so you wanna get that preheating right away. Okay, and I'll show you what the next step is. So, like I said before, the egg whites, I have 3 in this little bag, but I only need 2. 2 egg whites equals 1/4 of a cup. Okay, so I'm gonna measure them into here, this small measuring cup, into 1/4. Come in close, see 1/4? All right, let's see. So we're gonna pour that in there. Let's see what that looks like. You did it. There we go. So that looks like 1/4. So that means I have a little bit left over that I'll not need. Okay, so take a good look at that. Raw egg whites don't look white. They kind of look pale yellow, but there cannot be any yolks in your whites. If there's little deep yellow blobs in there, that's bits of egg yolk, and then this recipe won't work. Another thing is, when you whip up egg whites, which we're gonna do, they whip up better if the egg whites are warm or at room temperature. If they're cold, they don't whip up as much. So warmer at room temperature for the egg whites. Okay, and I'll come back and we'll do the next step. Okay, so if you look inside, I have put the egg whites inside the bowl and I've attached the whisk attachment. So the idea here is to beat the egg whites to get them very, very fluffy. They're gonna kind of look like shaving cream when they've really been beaten. And as for the sugar, this measuring cup holds 2/3 of a cup sugar, which is how much we need. Now I happen to have at home a 2/3 measuring cup, but we don't have those at school. So you'll have to measure out 1/3 twice. That gets you 2/3. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do is start this up. Now this mixer and the mixers we have at school are very, very similar. I'm gonna start it mixing kind of slower at about speed 4. Okay? And nothing much will happen at first. So actually I'm gonna go higher. Just like that. And once it starts to get foamy, a little bit foamy, I'm going to start to add the sugar. And what's important is that you add the sugar gradually. Now look, it's starting to get foamy. That's good. So I'm going to have this here. What? I'm going to do it like the sugar is like a waterfall going in there. Just like that. See, it's like a waterfall, a slow waterfall of sugar. We'll come back when I put in all the sugar. Okay, so I've added all the sugar. I stopped it just so you can look inside and see what's going on, but it's still pretty soupy, okay? I'm gonna keep beating this. It's gotta get thick. It's gonna get real white and it's gonna get really thick, like I said, shaving cream. So that's gonna take a little while, and I'm gonna go all the way up to speed 10 to get there, okay? So I'll come back and I'll show you what the right texture looks like. All right, take a good look in here. See how thick it is? That's what you're looking for. Nice and thick. Now, I was timing this. It took me about 7 minutes at speed 10 to get here. So you can't give up too soon. You gotta go all the way till it's nice and thick and get this stuff off the whisk. So now we're gonna add the rest of the ingredients, which are, and it doesn't matter what order they go in, a teaspoon of vanilla, full teaspoon of, ooh, okay, that's a little more, that's okay. Teaspoon of vanilla, just a little pinch of salt, maybe like that much, a little bit of salt. 1 cup of the chocolate chips. And this is 1 cup of the peanuts. Okay. The best tool to do this with, really the only tool to do this with, is the rubber spatula. This is called folding. You're just getting all that good stuff in there. It's like that. This does not look like cookie dough. I don't know what it looks like, but it doesn't look like cookie dough because it's not even close. These are meringues. Okay, so that is ready. Now what you're also going to need to have ready is some parchment paper and some baking sheets, and I'll get to that in a second. Okay, so I have lined 2 baking sheets with parchment. You gotta have parchment, otherwise they will stick. Invest in some parchment. Trust me, you'll use it over and over. Now, one thing about making these is you don't want to make them too big, because if they're too big, they never dry out all the way through and they're gooey inside. You have raw egg white inside, and that's gross and probably unsafe to eat. Ideally, you'll get about 24 of them, about 24. So what I do is I take 2 spoons. Don't use an ice cream scoop, it's too big. Use 2 teaspoons, 2 small teaspoons, okay? Scoop a little bit up. So they're gonna scoop a little bit up, hold it over here, and then use the other spoon to push it off, like that. And I'm gonna do another one. So get a good scoop, push it off with the other spoon. These can be fairly close to each other. They don't really expand. They don't get bigger like most cookies do. So just like that. So these guys are not too big, and that's a good thing, because like I said, they don't cook all the way through, and that has happened with students, and they're always disappointed. They're always like, oh my God, I'm eating raw egg white. That's gross. So I'm gonna keep doing, and then keep doing these, and we'll see how many I ultimately come up with. Okay, you can see what I did here. I ended up with 28, and that's a good number. Again, you want about 20, you want probably not less than 20, probably not much more than 32, something like that. Okay, now also in your oven, you need to have 2 racks in there, because one of the baking sheets will go on one rack, one of the baking sheets will go on the other rack. The oven is definitely preheated to 350. Here's where things get weird for these forgotten meringues. I'm going to put these into the oven, and then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the oven off. So these go into the oven, then the oven gets turned off, and they sit in the oven overnight. with no heat on them. They just sit in the oven overnight. They're not baking, they're drying out. That's what's happening with these. That's what you saw before, was them all dried out. So they go into the oven, we turn off the oven, and they have to stay in there overnight. And you can't use the oven either that night for dinner. The oven's kind of out of bounds for until these guys are done. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to put them in the oven, shut off the heat, and then wake up to them in the morning. That's why they're called forgotten meringues, because sometimes I forget that I've done them. But these are really good. So I hope you try this strange little recipe at home.